In a world that just never stops talking, how do you figure out what's actually true? It's something we all face every single day. So in this explainer, we're going to dive into a really powerful, maybe even counterintuitive idea that the real truth, well, it isn't found by shouting louder, but by listening closer.
I mean, really think about that for a second. We are constantly surrounded by opinions, by arguments, by just noise, all of it fighting for our attention. So the big question is, how do we cut through all that static to find the actual signal, the thing that's really true?
Well, it really boils down to two totally different approaches. On one side, you've got the loudest argument. Its whole goal is to persuade, to win. But on the other side, you have the closest listening. And that's not about winning at all. It's about understanding, about figuring out what's really going on.
To really see this difference in action, let's jump into a simple story. It's about a conflict in a classroom and how the quietest person in the room, well, she ended up finding the clearest answer.
So, picture this, a simple science project, and two of Mia's classmates are in the middle of a classic argument over a plant that is definitely not happy. One of them is convinced it's not getting enough sun, the other is absolutely sure it's being overwatered. The voices are getting louder, but they're not getting any closer to a solution. But here's where Mia's approach is a total game changer. She doesn't just add her own opinion to the mix. She doesn't try to shout over them. Instead, she just steps back from the argument and turns her attention to the actual facts. And check out what she finds. While everyone else was caught up in their own theories, she went to the project journal and found this one single entry. It was the crucial piece of evidence that everyone else had totally missed in the heat of the moment. And just like that, with this one piece of evidence, the answer becomes crystal clear. It wasn't one thing or the other, it was a mix of both. And Mia presents her conclusion, not as an attack, but just as a simple observation based on the facts. And suddenly, the argument just dissolves. So what did she actually do? It was a simple but really powerful three-step process. First, pause the noise. Second, check the facts. And third, share what you find gently, focusing on clarity instead of on winning. Now, Mia's method points to a much bigger lesson here. What she was using wasn't just a good trick for a science project, it's basically a masterclass in a really powerful skill we call discernment. So, to discern something, that means you're actively figuring out what's true. See, it's not a passive thing, it's not just being quiet. It is the active process of looking closely, thinking carefully, and putting all the pieces together until you have a clear picture. It's all about committing to understanding over winning.
And that brings up a really key question, doesn't it? If both sides are trying to get to an answer, what's the real fundamental difference between wanting to discern and just wanting to win?
The answer really lies in one word: evidence. An argument is often just fueled by opinion and emotion, but discernment? It's grounded in evidence, the verifiable facts, the signs that point toward the truth, just like that entry in Mia's journal. And what's so fascinating about all this is that the idea of finding truth in quiet spaces, it's not new at all. It's a timeless principle, and there's some ancient wisdom that gives us a powerful metaphor for our own noisy world. I mean, long before we had 24-hour news cycles and social media feeds, ancient thinkers and prophets already understood that the most profound truths, well, they don't usually shout to be heard. They ask us to be still and to listen, really listen. Take the incredible story of the prophet Elijah. He was looking for a sign, and he expected it to be in the loudest, most dramatic things you can imagine. A huge wind, a raging fire, a massive earthquake. But the true message wasn't in any of that. It only came after all that noise passed, in a gentle whisper. So, when you put Mia's story and this idea of a gentle whisper together, what do they teach us? A few really important things. First, that truth doesn't always have to shout. Second, that real wisdom comes from paying close attention, not from having the strongest opinion. And finally, that true strength isn't about being the loudest person in the room, but about speaking with grace. Okay, so this brings us to the most important question of all. How can we actually apply this in our own lives? How do we start to cultivate that wiser voice inside us, the one that really listens before it speaks? If you take just one thing away from our whole conversation today, let it be this. Real wisdom isn't measured in volume or how confident you sound. It's measured in the discipline of listening first, listening to the facts, to the context, and to those quiet truths that everyone else might be missing. And that leaves us with one final question for you to think about. In your work, in your relationships, in your community, where is the noise drowning out the signal? Where might the real truth be waiting for you, not in all the shouting, but in the quiet?